Harvard Divinity School.
House of Muhammad, launching the Ahl al-Bayt Research Initiative at the Harvard Divinity School, April 20th, 2026.
All right, everyone. Hello, welcome. Welcome. We are very pleased to have all of you here with us today for what we hope to be a very special event and basically the launch of this new research initiative that we have here at the Harvard Divinity School. Our event titled House of Muhammad, launching the Ahl al-Bayt Research Initiative at the Harvard Divinity School, a program that is very generously and kindly supported by the Jaffer Family Foundation of New York. And we're also very pleased to have members of the board here with us today. Without their generous and kind support, our research would not have been possible here at the Harvard Divinity School. Now, this research initiative builds off of previous work and that we have done at HDS on the lives and legacies of various imams or the holy personalities of Shia Islam, the life and legacy of Imam Hussein that we started a few years back, the life and legacy of Imam Ali, and we've hosted various events and workshops, including our Ashura workshop on the life and martyrdom of Imam Hussein and the global impact that has had across Islamic history and across geography and territory. Both those initiatives also kindly supported by the Jaffer Family Foundation of New York. So the work that we've done across the years in some ways really has now culminated and come under this umbrella of the House of Muhammad, the Ahl al-Bayt. So Ahl al-Bayt or House of Muhammad refers to the family of Prophet Muhammad. So the Prophet himself, his daughter Fatima, Ali, his son-in-law and cousin, and the lines of the imams, or the what may be called the holy saints or the holy leaders of Shia Islam, the descendants of Fatima. Now, this search and look at the Ahl al-Bayt really reconfigurates and places, makes central a focus on Ahl al-Bayt as part of Islamic studies. In many ways, when Islam is taught, or even in academic work on Islam, the centrality of the family of the Prophet himself is usually understudied or looked over. So we may not grasp the philosophical importance, the theological importance, the doctrinal importance that the family of Muhammad has as a whole. And we've termed this research project and this launch event the House of Muhammad, rather than just as a translation of Ahl al-Bayt. And I hope maybe this can come out in the conversations with our esteemed scholars here. But the House of Muhammad, showing and contextualizing the family of Prophet Muhammad in a broader and more universal perspective. Because the houses of various prophets have been important across time. The house of David, the house of Solomon. So it's not something particular or limited to just Shia Islam. This is something global. Or ancient traditions, the Persian Empire, the Romans, important noble families had always been termed the houses. So the House of Muhammad here to broaden our perspective and our comparative approach to the family of Prophet Muhammad himself. So as this is a rare research initiative at a Western university, we're very excited of all the doors and opportunities that can exist for us to really think about and delve and approach methodically the study of the Ahl al-Bayt. So research enterprise. And our conversations, I hope today, can shed light on this. How should we think about the Ahl al-Bayt? How should we study them? What are the different perspectives and approaches that we can take to understanding the Holy Family of Prophet Muhammad? Second, to think about how we can teach about the Ahl al-Bayt, how we can include them in curricula. When we teach Islamic studies or when we have curricula focused on learning more about the depth of Islam, what are the various ways and effective methods we can use to really bring out the meaning and significance of the Ahl al-Bayt, the House of Muhammad. And finally, for events and public dissemination, how can we get out and inform the HDS community, so the Harvard community, the broader public about the research findings that we have. And as part of this initiative, we're hoping to make small documentaries as part of our YouTube channel and really highlight the various aspects of thinking about the House of Muhammad, as well as the various holy personalities of the imams themselves, so that there can be a public education on who are the imams, who is Imam Ali, who is Imam Hussein, who is Imam Sajjad, Imam Reza. Many times, even among those who study Shi'ism, there's a particular emphasis on Imam Ali or Imam Hussein especially, and other imams may be understudied or under-taught in our discourses, in our classes. So we hope to centralize and bring together the entire family as part of the House of Muhammad program. So our roundtable today, I'm very honored and pleased to introduce for everyone. We have a very esteemed lineup, and I'm going to introduce each of our guests today in an alphabetical order. Our first guest is Professor Hassan Abbas, who has been very kind and supportive of our project across the years and has had a special capacity to advise us. We're very grateful for all of his support. He is a fellow at New America and has written many books on Central Asia, South Asia, geopolitics, but of course here for our purposes, a very important book on Imam Ali entitled The Prophet's Heir, The Life of Ali ibn Abi Talib, which we also as a project, we've been very happy to support Professor Abbas's work. We have Sara Aziz, who is a PhD candidate here at Harvard University at the NELC program, and she works on Imam Sajjad's prayers, which is understudied, and we're very much looking forward to her work. We have Professor Mohsen Gudarzi. Mohsen Gudarzi, he is our faculty director here at the Harvard Divinity School, and he is a professor of Islamic studies and Quran studies. He's published an excellent article on the Quran and thinking and approaching the Quran. So I hope that this will also, we can have a fruitful conversation perhaps on this, dear Mohsen, on the concept of maybe even the Bayt, of what the Bayt is, as the Kaaba in some ways, but we can come back to this. Dr. Muhammad Saqa, who has been a lecturer across the previous years at Harvard University's NELC, so that's Near Eastern Languages and Civilization Department, but just recently, last month, we're very fortunate that Dr. Saqa has joined us as a postdoctoral fellow on Islamic thought and history. So Muhammad will, hopefully we're working on various aspects of our research here on the House of Muhammad, and we're very excited to have him here with us and looking forward to his many contributions to the project. And finally, Dr. Hassanain Walji. Dr. Walji, again, who has been very kind and supportive of everything we've done at the project across the various years. He is the director of the United Global Initiative, an important global welfare and educational initiative. And he's been a leading community member who's also written extensively on various Shia communities and produced documentaries as well on Shia communities, including the Khoja community. So to all our panelists, thank you so much for joining us. This event is a hybrid right now. So this is both online and in person. So for the online guests, welcome to you as well. I will control, once I stop speaking shortly, I will control the camera, so you will be able to see all the guests, all our speakers. In terms of our format for this roundtable, it's going to be a conversation. So I'll begin by asking, we'll go through a few questions. I'll moderate the discussions about the House of Muhammad, and this will be a conversation amongst all the speakers that will hopefully be very fruitful in approaching the study of the House of Muhammad. And then at the final section of the event, the audience here in person and also online, we'd be very interested to hear your comments, your questions that you may have. So we'll open up the floor to questions from the audience. Attendees on our website, I'm just looking at the camera over there, attendees on our website through our Zoom, please do write your questions on chat, and I will try to read through them and ask your questions at the end of the event. All right, so let's begin. First question, who is the Ahl al-Bayt? What is the House of Muhammad? Maybe let's get some of our basic definitions and core understandings out before we can build off into more advanced questions.
Hello, everyone. Very nice to see you all here. Thank you so much, Dr. Mohseni. So I'll begin because my area of expertise is kind of farthest from this distinguished panel, farthest from the Shi'i tradition. I work on the Quran, primarily speaking. And so I want to begin by with a broad exploration of the meaning of the term Ahl and Ahl al-Bayt in general, and then moving towards more specificity as it applies to the Prophet Muhammad in particular, and also hopefully addressing a couple of issues that Dr. Mohseni also raised about the meaning of Bayt in the Quran in relation to the Meccan sanctuary, as well as the connections between some of the ancient traditions you pointed out and the way in which the Prophet Muhammad's family is imagined. So, the term Ahl in Arabic, or the term Al, which is closely related to it, in the most restrictive sense, you could say that Ahl means zawj, a partner, spouse. Even now we use the term ta'ahul in the sense of marriage. Muta'ahil means married. In the slightly broader sense, it encompasses spouses and children. But it is used oftentimes in a still wider sense, and there it approaches the term, in the Roman context, we have the familia and then domus. And familia is largely the kind of immediate nuclear family. Domus is the larger house. And I think it's so apt that you have translated Ahl al-Bayt as the house of Muhammad, because house really does encompass that wider way of understanding the larger family, which is largely genealogical, but not exclusively genealogical. We have a famous tradition in the Islamic context, Salmanu minna Ahl al-Bayt. Salman is from us, Ahl al-Bayt. Now, Salman was not genealogically related to the Prophet Muhammad, but was still counted as Ahl al-Bayt. And it's interesting that we have different kind of occasions of, not to say revelation, but occasions offered for the utterance of this statement. When was it offered? Who offered it? In one version, it is the Prophet Muhammad himself who offers it. When after the Battle of the Ditch, there's a conflict, the muhajirun, the immigrants, are trying to lay claim to Salman. They're saying he's from us because he had this great suggestion of digging a trench, which saved the community. So people are trying to claim him. The Medina and Ansar are trying to claim him. They say he's from us. And then the Prophet says, no, he's actually from us, Ahlul Bayt. He belongs to us. He's the closest to us. But very interestingly, in a different version, it is Ali ibn Abi Talib, Imam Ali himself, who is praising Salman. And he says, he has studied the earlier scriptures, and he has also great knowledge of the Quran, and he is from us, Ahl al-Bayt. So Imam Ali, kind of almost interchangeably with the Prophet, is using this term Ahl al-Bayt, laying claim to kind of defining the boundaries of Ahl al-Bayt. We have this statement, Al-Mahdi minna Ahl al-Bayt. The messianic figure within the Islamic tradition is from the Ahl al-Bayt, which is uttered in some versions by the Prophet Muhammad, but in other versions actually by Ibn Abbas, who was a cousin of the Prophet Muhammad. But there's this sense that what is the family of the Prophet? Is it just his kind of immediate nuclear family? Is it the larger group of his descendants, or is it even encompassing the Abbasids, which was something that people debated in the 2nd and 3rd century in the Islamic context? So you see some of those divisions here. And then when we think about the house in a very kind of secular context, not having to do with the Prophet, but you have even some domestic animals are counted as part of the bayt. So, for example, cats there is a hadith that says, as-sinwatu min ahl al-bayt. So your cats are kind of part of your house, or domus, basically, because they belong to you in a sense. Moving kind of towards the other point, which is focusing on the Prophet Muhammad himself in particular. In the Quran, of course, we have this notion of Ahl al-Bayt, which is applied to Abraham and his wife Sarah, or Sarah as the English would say. And when the angels give them the blessing of Isaac being born, they say, Rahmatullah wa barakatuhu alaykum Ahl al-Bayt. So God's mercy and blessings upon you, Ahl al-Bayt. And when we think about how the Quran kind of introduces the Israelites, it's very interesting that we do have, of course, the concept of Banu Israel, which is the larger genealogical group. But what the Quran really focuses on in many of its passages is the righteous within that genealogical group. So not everybody among the Banu Israel, but the righteous in particular. We have in Surah Al-An'am, Surah 6 in the Quran, Surah of the cattle, a long list of names, 18 names in particular, and they are praised as belonging to the family of Ibrahim, and God has gifted them to Abraham. وَوَهَبْنَا لَهُ, there's the verb of gifting is used. And there's also in that passage, crucially, the term a'imma appears. So when God gifts Ishaq wa Yaqub, Isaac and Jacob to Abraham, then there is this statement that وَجَعَلْنَاهُمْ أَئِمَّةً يَهْدُونَ بِأَمْرِنَا. We appointed them as imams, as leaders, as examples, as paragons, who guide to our command. And so it is not everybody who falls within that kind of genealogy, but rather the righteous descendants in particular who are in the Quran. The focus of defining the kind of family of Abraham, and within the Islamic tradition, and in particular in the Shi'i tradition, but not exclusively in the Shia tradition. The Ahl al-Bayt is used in relation, of course, to the family of the Prophet Muhammad in the sense of the Prophet Muhammad, but also his daughter Fatima, and then Ali ibn Abi Talib, Imam Ali, and then their sons and family. We have multiple ahadith, multiple traditions in relation to the only verse in the Quran which exclusively uses Ahl al-Bayt in relation to the Prophet Muhammad, which إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى Muhammad, where there's this story of the Prophet Muhammad every day before the Salatul Fajr, before the morning prayer, standing behind the door of the house of Fatima and Ali, and then calling them as-salat, as-salat, Ahl al-Bayt. O Ahl al-Bayt, this is the occasion for salat. And even in some Sunni sources, this is used to explain that verse in the Quran, and say that this kind of helps define the Ahl al-Bayt in the Islamic tradition. And so this is a more restrictive sense of not just every descendant or not all the Banu Hashim, but rather the Prophet's own kind of bloodline in particular. And here it's important to mention that in the ancient context of the Roman context, for example, the domos, the house, if you were to define the house of Fatima and Ali ibn Abi Talib, it would have belonged to the father of Ali ibn Abi Talib. But actually, here it kind of belongs to the Prophet Muhammad. And part of the reason for that is that Abu Talib, the father of Ali ibn Abi Talib, and Abdullah, the father of the Prophet Muhammad, they had the same mother. And so they have special affinity. And there's a reason why Abu Talib was the uncle who supported the Prophet very closely. There's a reason. It goes back genealogically to their common mother as well. And there's a reason why the Prophet Muhammad himself adopted Ali ibn Abi Talib and reared him in his household, because again, there was that tightness of community, so that the children of Ali ibn Abi Talib are in a sense the children of the Prophet Muhammad. And that goes, kind of ascends also as well as descend. Dr. Mohseni mentioned the notion of Bayt in the Quran, which of course is used also in relation to another institution in the ancient world. So we have one institution, which is the family, which is the locus of sanctity. Another place where you have the manifestation of sanctity is the sanctuary, Baytullah. And very interestingly, in some Islamic sources, Ahl al-Bayt is applied more broadly to all the Quraysh, in the sense that they are the people who live in the vicinity of Baytullah, of the Meccan sanctuary. So you have that usage, or even Ahlullah, because Allah is the Rabb Hadha al-Bayt, He's the Lord of this sanctuary. So it's used in that sense also. But in the Shi'i context, there is also a close connection between the Meccan sanctuary and the family of the Prophet. So these are not completely independent of each other, but the sanctity that is revealed in one of them and the sanctity revealed in the other co-constitute each other. There's this famous poem by Al-Farazdaq, this Umayyad poet, who is describing Imam Zain al-Abidin, on whom Sarah is working and researching, on whose prayers. And then he says, this is the one, in introducing Imam Zain al-Abidin, he says, this is the one whose steps are familiar to the plain of Mecca. هَذَا الَّذِي تَعْرِفُ الْبَطْحَاءُ وَطْأَتَهُ. And then he says, and the house knows him. And the sacred and the profane within, meaning what is profane and what is sacred within the confines of the sanctuary, known him. وَالْبَيْتُ يَعْرِفُهُ وَالْحِلُّ وَالْحَرَمُ. So the Bayt of the Meccan sanctuary knows the Bayt of the Prophet, and these two co-constitute each other. So I wanted to just begin with very kind of general thoughts, and hopefully others on the panel could kind of focus more on the Ahl al-Bayt as defined within the context of the family of the Prophet in particular.
If no one else, thank you so much, Professor Godarzi, for the wonderful remarks. I think you took most of what I was going to say in a very good way. But actually, thank you again, Professor Mohseni, and to the esteemed panelists, and of course, the generosity of the Jaffer Family Foundation for making all this possible. So this, just to build off of a lot of what Professor Godarzi was mentioning, what's been very interesting in a lot of the recent research that we've been doing here at the Project on Shi'ism is looking at really just the different ways we can look at and study the Ahl al-Bayt. So there are linguistic ways we could look at, like just what does Ahl mean? If you go to the dictionaries and to the sources, the grammatical sources. So in this sense, one of the very interesting things is that the word Ahl and Al, the relationship between these two, is discussed very much in the sources. And we might think, in our contemporary period that it's a straightforward answer. Ahl and al are usually used interchangeably. So when you send salawat to the Prophet and to the Prophet's family, Ahl al-Bayt, or al-Muhammad. However, when you look at the sources, it seems that both words can actually be used not just interchangeably, but they can mean both family or follower. And so even linguistically, if you look, so some of the theories about, okay, what is al might just be a form of ahl itself. Al is a metastasized form of al, so therefore it's a diminutive form, it's a smaller form of it. So these words, there's not a consensus on this, but some say it's just the same, it's the same word. So al and ahl are the same. But in a broader sense too, there's a larger discussion that scholars have, and here I'll just be reading from some of the notes that I have. So experts on the Quran, if you look at exegesis or lexicographers, people working on dictionaries, they record various positions. One, al, as I mentioned, it's maqlub from ahl, so it's a form of ahl. And that the al of Allah, that Professor Godarzi mentioned, and his messenger are his allies and supporters. So they're his awliya and his ansar. So for the ansar of Medina, these could be the al Rasul, right? More, if you look at some scholars also talk about there's a difference of opinion about who constitutes al Muhammad. So this is from al-Bayhaqi, who is a very famous medieval Persian Sunni scholar and collector of one of the most authoritative hadith collections in the Sunni school of thought. He says that the people of the house, Ahl al-Bayt, some say that the Al Muhammad is Ahl al-Bayt. Okay, Al Muhammad, Ahl al-Bayt one. Some say though that the Al Muhammad are those who obey him, ata'ahu, or follow him, tabahu, according to his sunnah, right? According to his life, his model. An-Nawawi, a famous Mamluk era scholar, says there's three definitions of Al Muhammad. The first definition that he mentions is that Al Muhammad is the entire community, Jami' al-Ummah. This is the first one that he mentions. The second is that they're Banu Hashim and Banu al-Muttalib, right? So the Quraysh is a larger tribe. There are many different houses. Professor Godarzi mentioned the Umayyads and the Abbasids. The rivalry over who is the Ahl al-Bayt, who gets the caliphate, really is really linked to this question. So here he says it's just Banu Hashim and Banu Muttalib, so kind of making it restricting it within the Quraysh. And the third is that they are his, maybe we can say household, Ahl Baytihi, and his progeny, Dhurriya. So even as we see here in every prayer that all Muslims say, or are supposed to say 5 times a day, they send salawat to Al Muhammad. Right. So who is this Al? Is it the entire Ummah? Is it just the Ahl al-Kisa, the 5 members that are usually more specific or restricted delimitation of the family of the Prophet? So really, so that's just one linguistic. And then if we look at historical as well, there's heavy debates in the early Islamic period about who is the Ahl al-Bayt. Right? So Professor Godarzi mentioned that one of the major, probably the most serious rivalry was between the Abbasids and then either the Talibids, or there's different terms that we can use, but basically the progeny of Ali and Fatima. So then directly through Muhammad, through the mother, right? Or Abbas, the uncle of the Prophet Muhammad. Why did that become very important? Is because there's a sense of agnatic, or from the patrilineal, from the male side. There's the only surviving, most likely the only surviving uncle, as far as we know, after the Prophet was Abbas. So then it would transfer. So then what does that mean? That means that if there is a genealogical, here just meaning like a direct tribal or blood relationship, that it would that the irs, or like the wasiya, or whatever we say as the succession to the Prophet, would go to the uncle of the Prophet rather than Ali, right? So this becomes a huge debate within early Islam, and then how you define the family then revolves around that. So there, the Umayyads also, right? So Yazid, who killed Imam Hussein, sometimes we cast this as a religious versus irreligious debate. There's a secular Yazid versus a sort of more religious Imam Hussein. But Yazid at that time claimed to be the caliph of the Muslim world. He was part of the family. He claimed to be the Prophet's family. Why? Because they were related blood-wise. That they had ancestors. So this was the whole debate, right? So how do you determine who the family is? So we have linguistic ways of looking at this. We have historical sources and discussions. And of course, one other fact, and, just to mention one more aspect of how to look at what the Ahl al-Bayt is, or the House of Muhammad, is I was going to mention, sorry, I forgot the last point that I was going to mention. Sorry, I forgot the last point that I was going to mention. There was another basic. Yeah, I remember. So there's also prophetology. So how do we think about how to even define the house of Muhammad? If you look at how the Quran talks about the houses, it usually talks about, as Professor Mohseni mentioned, the house of Solomon, the house of David. But then when it comes to is this a continuation of with the house of Muhammad as well? So when we look at how historical books are written about Muhammad, or excuse me, about just like where does history start? A lot of historical works, if you look at Tabari, for example, or other historians, they start quite logically with the creation of the world, right? So it's the creation, and then the first sort of debates or sort of contentions that were happening on the earth have to do with Iblis, right? So Iblis originally in many of these discussions is a general of Allah, an army sent by Allah to basically restore order on earth because of divisions that were happening. And so he becomes the first rival. And then when Adam is created, he becomes jealous of Adam's station. And so this is really so prophetology. So where do we start? How do we think about the history of the Ahl al-Bayt? Is it a history of humanity, right? So the first person who's created, Adam, and is it a history of prophets? Because afterwards, when Adam is after Adam is created, there's immediate jealousy with Iblis, and the sort of primordial or cosmic tensions start. And then in Tabari and other sources, they talk about, okay, Adam's successor, Noah's successor, Abraham's successor, and then it goes on and on until you reach Muhammad and al-Muhammad. And then, so can we really start a history of the Ahl al-Bayt in late antique Arabia? Is that a good place to start? Or should we look at it as a history of humanity, how many Muslims also looked at the Ahl al-Bayt? It was part of a longer, it's part of the cosmos. It's how we define the Prophet, and this is the last point that I just want to make, how we define the Prophet then really matters. In how we talk about the family. Because if the Prophet Muhammad, if we just look at him as a historical figure, he was born in 570, passed away in 622, 632. Is that Prophet Muhammad? Then he becomes a historical figure. Then we just think about, okay, he contributed, or he founded a movement of Islam. Or no, is the Prophet in our hearts? Does the Prophet live? Is he there? Does he respond to your salam when you send salam? Every time when you read prayer, many Muslims believe the Prophet responds to you. Or maybe we don't hear this because of our own limitations or veils that we have, but we believe the Prophet's there and he responds. So if the Prophet is there, he's part of like our lives today. That also gives us a very different approach and way of even thinking about the Ahl al-Bayt. So that's kind of, so I just wanted to mention that there are these different sort of, each paradigm that we choose to approach the Ahl al-Bayt and the House of Muhammad will greatly impact the sources we draw from, the methodologies that we use, and how we think about how to engage with the House of Muhammad today.
That was a very, if I can jump in here, I guess, that was a very fascinating discussion on a few points, if I can summarize for myself. One is the notion of the house, the main concept, the House of Muhammad, what it can mean internally within Islam and universally in other traditions as well. A scope issue, so there's a scope of what the Ahl al-Bayt entails. Is it narrow? Is it broad? Can it be both narrow and broad? So the different levels and degrees of the scope of the Ahl al-Bayt. And then this family follower, maybe we can use the word spectrum, a family follower spectrum. Can we be part of the Ahl al-Bayt? Was Salman Farsi part of Ahl al-Bayt? Is it exclusive? So it's very interesting to then, in some ways, look at it from this house perspective and bring these new ideas or follower perspective, which brings me to another question, related question. Then what is family? Like we say the family of Prophet Muhammad. Do we know what family is? Are we thinking kind of like, are we modern people thinking of, a family, a nuclear family. This is what a family is. Because right now we're thinking, okay, let's call it the house of Muhammad. But if we said family of Muhammad, do we know what family is? What is a family? Is it possible that modern or Western lens that we may be wearing impact or distort our understanding of the family of Prophet Muhammad? How can we approach the concept of family itself?
I was just speaking, so I feel bad speaking again.
Go ahead.
But if anyone, please jump in. Yeah. So this is also another very fascinating issue: is how we define the family, as Professor Mohseni mentioned. I guess. So, what's the word for family in Arabic? We've talked about ahl, we've talked about al, but there are actually at least like a dozen or 2 dozen main words that are used to describe family or tribal relations. You have zurriya. Sometimes that is also used. You have there's qabila. There's like janb. There are all of these different words.
Shira.
Ashira, exactly. One of the major ones. Wanzur ashiratuk al aqrabin. Warn your closest ashira. What is ashira? Is it a tribe? So we use this word tribe to kind of usually just kind of covers about 10 or more like main definitions that can easily be used. But one of the very interesting things that I found in some of the research that we've been doing is that even the basic notions of, is it just like genealogy, is it blood, is also challenged. Is that what family is? One of the main words that's used that the Prophet Muhammad referred to Fatima, Professor Godarzi mentioned, is Abiha. So what does this mean? This is a kind of a Abiha is the mother of her father. Okay, so that doesn't really match our current family understandings. You can't be the mother of your father. By definition, the daughter cannot, right, be the mother. Ali is also there are these kind of sort of hidden meanings that really need to come out to better understand what, in the context of, as far as we can see, at least according to our sources, how family is understood. One of the other words that Imam Ali is referred to is Abu Turab as well. This is also a very odd. So the father of the earth, or father of land. So Abiha, in some discussions, Abiha, she's the mother of her father because it's through the cosmic creative power of Fatima that the light of Muhammad is brought forth. So can there be a Muhammad without a Fatima? This becomes then a question of, so who's Fatima? This is the secret of Fatima that we a lot of times see. Ali then is called Abu Turab, right? Why is it called? One of the reasons that maybe he can be called Abu Turab is that he's the only figure, as far as we know. Professor Abbas can, of course, speak about this much more, given his own scholarship and research. He was the only person born in the Kaaba, as far as we can tell. And the Kaaba, according to many hadith and narration, and Professor Godarzi's work, I know he taught it. I think he taught a course just last semester, just on the Kaaba, on the Bayt. Is said in many narrations to be the first land that's created on earth. So if like there, as an imagine, it's the first dome of land that comes up above the oceans, according to many hadith. So the Kaaba is what's that?
It's like a belly button.
It's like a belly button. So it's called a navel. It's literally the navel. So there's like a navel, there's like umbilical cord to the navel that comes down. There's a pillar, right? And Ali is born in this, right? So this is also maybe one of the reasons that Mecca is called al-Qura as well, like the mother of all cities, because it's the mother of all cities because it's the mother of all land on earth as well. So then Ali is the owner of that, according to these discussions, right? So these are very interesting ways of just thinking about, like, okay, so these ideas of family seem to be very different from our ideas of even how we think today about nuclear families or bloodline. So what does even blood mean, right? If it's a blood relation, does that mean you have a similar ancestor, or you're a similar the same, you share a mother and a father? So these discussions are there in the sources for sure, and they're discussed a lot. But I just wanted to make a quick comment on just maybe challenging some of these ways, or maybe trying to think a little bit broader about family.
If I can add little, thank you very much again for this great opportunity. I'm taking this scholarship and the way our friends have mentioned it, the in-depth analysis from a very linguistic perspective, a Quranic perspective, is extremely valuable. Let me move, if I'm an ordinary Muslim, and I am asked, who's the family of the Prophet? What is my criterion? My criterion is history. My criterion is also the Quran. And both of you have already mentioned it. I'm just repeating, but from an ordinary person's perspective, not the scholarly perspective, which will be the two verses. One is the verse about where the Prophet said, I'm not asking you for any reward except muaddat fil qurba, love, or ask for closeness to those who are very close to me. Ask for love and muaddat. Muaddat is such a deep word. I often think, and I was once, without much training in the Arabic language, I was thinking of what is muaddat? What Prophet is asking for? And I said, the only word that I could think of in an ordinary sense was Wadud, the name of God, which is about love. So it's the deepest form of love. And this is one verse which contradicts some of the other principles of Quran. There are experts of Quranic studies here, so please correct me, Professor. But I was thinking in other cases of 2 or 3 other prophets, Idris, Nuh, and one other, Abraham also, I think. God says in Quran that, O Prophet, you don't expect or don't ask for any reward for what you're offering to the people. In case of Prophet Muhammad, he's changing the principle, saying, no call for reward, a call for the love, the deep love for those who are close to you. So that principle is made that, okay, those who are very close, now the word family is not there. But who are the people the Prophet picked? Hussein minni wa ana min al Hussein. Hussein is from me, I am from Hussein. Same verse for Hassan. Same verse looking at the face of Ali is love. Whoever treats Fatima in a wrong way angers her, angers me. They're very clear examples. That's one. The other one, the striking verse is, of course, from a historical perspective, is what we call the verse of Mubahala. Verse 361, I previously mentioned, now 42, the 42nd surah and 23rd verse, where it is clearly asked when there's this major, very serious dialogue happening with some Christian monks, and the Prophet said, okay, let's bring both the families. And this is one verse on which, despite entrenched sectarianism, I have not, at least, and please correct me, anyone from audience, if we have received any contradictory interpretations. Everyone says, when the Prophet said, let's bring, we bring our sons, you bring your sons. We bring our women, you bring your women. We bring ourselves and the closest to us, you bring yours. And now the history book says, both in the Sunni and the Shia tradition, that so many people thought, the close to the Prophet, they knew the next day this debate is happening. They brought their families. They were very close, waiting. The Prophet said, okay, Ali, you come with me. Fatima, you come with me. And Hassan and Hussein. The definition as an ordinary Muslim about the family of the Prophet is very evident to me. So that's from an ordinary perspective, I wanted to add that color. And this is, I'm borrowing from what I heard from both of you. Thank you.
Sure, on this point, yeah.
Thanks. I think this is... voice, always so what?
So we are always asked or to see, so what? So when we're defining or trying to understand the House of Muhammad, or what is the so what of it today, for not from the theoretical or academic point of view, but from the practicing Muslim point of view. And being a Muslim and a Shia, I believe that the first thing is from the lens of, we are not talking about the theology or genealogy, because that's gone. We are not talking about the inheritance, because the worldly or physical inheritance is gone. We're talking about the spiritual inheritance. And spiritual inheritance, as a follower, we take from Hadith al-Saqlan. And when hadith is because that's the so what of me today. That why is it important for me to understand what is the house of Muhammad? Because if I'm going to follow the house of Muhammad as per Prophet's command, then I need to know who to follow, and equally important, who not to follow. And to me, what Professor Hassan Abbas says at the time of Mubayla or in the Saqlan, that clearly defines. And if I have to explain to my two young adults is why it is important, what is the so what, why we are debating about it or discussing or trying to understand, the significance is from the Saqlan's lens, that who are we going to follow and why we need to understand. Thank you.
Maybe it's worth mentioning the Hadith Saqalain for everyone.
So the just briefly, the hadith Thaqalain is I leave, the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam is said to have said, I leave behind two weighty things, taraktum fikum thaqalain, two weighty things, my ahli bayti and kitabi, or so basically the Quran and the family. So these two things, so the Quran and the family are kind of related in the sense. So it's a huge question, of course, exactly what does this mean? And it's a big hadith both in Shia and Sunni sources.
If I may just add one nuance to that. I'm an American of Pakistani descent. I grew up in Pakistan, Pakistani schools, always hearing a different version of this, which was, I'm leaving behind myself two things, Quran and Sunnah. So later on, when I started looking this up, I found this is neither in Sahih, nor in Bukhari, nor in Sahih Sitta, except in Mustadrak al-Hakim, which is extremely important book. In every major source of Sunni hadith and Shia hadith, the verse says, I'm leaving behind exactly what Professor Zaga said. I'm leaving behind myself two things, Quran and my family. But why in every textbook I was taught a verse which is accurate, but not in main hadith. So there's this, that's why the dispute also. While there's this entrenched effort somehow to hide this as well, to hide who Ahl al-Bayt are and what the centrality of Ahl al-Bayt is. I just wanted to add that. Single narration. And there are so many others.
Yes.
Companions of the Messenger of God. And Zayd bin Arqam was asked this very question that we are here explaining and trying to define. He was asked this question by generations that were subsequent to the original generation of the messenger. And he substantiated precisely the definition that many of you have arrived at, which is that he defined the family of the prophet as those upon whom charity is disallowed. And so then he goes into some detail as to who those members might be in his family. But the question has historically been asked and it has been answered. And the answer is also authenticated durably over the centuries.
If I might also add, perhaps, to this question, which is an important question, and one may answer it in different ways, and one could even hold on to both answers at the same time without using one to fully discount the other. And it goes back to the question of the meaning of al also, and who are the al Muhammad? And there are, linguists or earlier scholars who try to answer, and they said there's two different definitions. One of them is the Ahl al-Bayt, which would be the family of the Prophet Muhammad, or the righteous among his descendants in particular, not all genealogical group, but rather the righteous. Or the other one would be whoever follows the Prophet and obeys the Prophet, man ata'ahu wa amila bi sunnatihi, and follows his sunnah, which appears in some texts. And it seems to me that obviously some of the disagreements that early Muslims have and which continue to be operative in our history today is precisely, how do we kind of continue to follow the legacy of the Prophet? Because you asked the so what question, and the so what is, I suppose, for a practicing Muslim, how do I continue to keep in touch with the legacy of the Prophet Muhammad? And the community had different ways of answering this. One was that as a whole, all the Muslims who follow the Prophet, they could lay claim to being that kind of falling under the Al Muhammad rubric. And the other one was more restrictive and looking at the righteous descendants of the Prophet Muhammad in particular. And in the Quran, it's very interesting that Al is used, you could say, in both senses. In the context of Fir'aun, when the Al Fir'aun is used, oftentimes, كَدَأْبِ آلِ فِرْعَوْنَ وَالَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ, it seems to be used not for Pharaoh and his family in particular, but rather for the Pharaoh and the Egyptian army in general. So the Junud, all the people who fought on behalf of him and who drowned because he led them to the wrong way. And then we have, of course, Ali Ibrahim, which seems to be genealogical or the righteous among his descendants. We have Ali Imran, which refers to Mary and Jesus and perhaps John the Baptist and Zechariah. And we have a very interesting reference in Surah Al-Baqarah, which again connects the Bayt, or basically the kind of place, the sanctuary, to the line, which says that when God appoints a new king for the Israelites, which is Saul, or as we would say in Arabic, Talut, there is a sign that he has been elected. And the sign is that the Tabut, or the Ark of the Covenant, which was really the kind of portable sanctuary of the Israelites, the Tabut, or the Ark of the Covenant, is given to this king. And it says it is what remains of وَبَقِيَّةً, it is what remains of what Alu Musa wa Alu Harun have left behind, which again seems to be a very clear genealogical understanding here of prophecy goes through the line of Moses, priesthood goes through the line of Aaron, Harun. And here again, it seems to be genealogical. So in the Quran, we have both of them, but in the context of the prophets, the genealogical way seems to be predominant within the Quran. And within Islamic history, of course, both of them have been operative at the same time. So for many Muslims, there has been this general notion of following the Prophet. Those who follow him are Ahl Muhammad. At the same time, special attention devoted towards the family of the Prophet, and whether it is Imam Ali or Hassan and Hussein or Ja'far ibn Sadiq or Imam Sadiq, as repositories of that kind of knowledge which has been passed on from the Prophet, perhaps. So both could, I suppose, coexist.
I'll just add to that is I think the question is in a sense inexhaustible because there are so many definitions. But one thing that stood out to me during my studies is that the scopes have always differed. We can see in both across different sources, early and late, Sunni and Shia. The scope has differed in defining what falls under the Ahlan. We already have whether it includes the wives, not the wives, the descendants, until when, are the Ashraf the same thing as the Ahl al-Bayt? We have a lot of these questions. But also within that is that the reverence, particularly to the reverence to the immediate descendants of the Prophet. That was something, both to the idea in general, to the prophetic genealogy, but also to particular individuals, something that has that is in a sense remarkable for cutting across these like the historically and also confessional lines. So there are now studies, for instance, in Ottoman period, right? What we call like Ottoman Ahl al-Baytism, or when you see a calligrapher signing an Ottoman calligrapher signing his calligraphy piece as Chawkar al-Aba, like, right, he's the servant of the people of the cloak. So I mentioned these examples because it is easy to fall in either extreme, to kind of say I have a particular definition and I'm sticking to it, or to say there's so many definitions, well, maybe we don't know. I think there's always nuance, and this is perhaps why what the value of scholarship is that it helps us see across different time periods. When we historicize, when we look at the sources, we see differences, and we see also how the Muslims across different times, across different traditions have navigated these differences and these scopes that keep widening and also constricting. Yes, that's all I have to say.
Maybe off of Sahara's question in response, then how should we think about it? Is the topic of Ahl al-Bayt, the House of Muhammad, is this a denominational subject? Is it a sectarian subject? Is it a Islamic studies subject? Because we tend to put it in the Shi'i studies discipline. Is this a topic for Shi'i studies?
Well, maybe I will respond a bit further. So you can already tell that I think it shouldn't be a topic of just Shia studies, or shouldn't be something. I don't think in academia we should treat things in a sectarian fashion. Because actually that is the problem in so many ways, that certain narratives take precedence over others, or are not given, are not treated. Certain sources are taking precedence over others, and are not necessarily treated critically. And this is something that I think has been, especially recently, there has been a lot of effort to remedy that, and scholarly reflections on how to deal with some of these some of these views that we have, I'm saying in the academy, have inherited over the years. Because so to go back to the question is, should something like the House of Muhammad, I think since you have the name Muhammad and Muhammad is the prophet, right? That answers it. If the prophet can be treated in a sectarian fashion, then so should his family. But if the prophet is not a sectarian topic, then so also should not so also should be the case for his family. I think what if we go about it in a sectarian fashion, then we don't see the full picture, and we don't see a lot of the things that actually make this such a beautiful and colorful picture. I'll give you another example, also from the Ottoman period, when I was. There are travels of Sayyid Ali Rais, one of the Ottoman travelers, and he keeps falling into problems, and he writes his it includes a lot of Chagatai Turkish poetry, and he says, when I fell, I was doing my travels and I was in strange lands. The ship broke, all this, and I kept praying, Ya Ali sandan madad dushtum bana destgir ol. Oh Ali, I have fallen, take my hand. We can if we in a sense we have something like this. Like, what do you do about that? A figure, for instance, like Ali, how do you deal with it? Do you deal with it in a sectarian sense? Do you deal with it more broadly? So I think when it comes to the family of the Prophet, the topic really kind of defies any sense of trying to confine it. And we see that more and more as we look at the tradition at large, across time periods, across languages. And I think also something else that is in a sense clear is that you cannot really restrict that question. And I'll give you another example. Another source, an Egyptian Sufi, 18th century. There is Al-Mu'min al-Shiblanji. He's an Egyptian Sufi, and he writes a work on the manaqib, or the virtues of the family of the Prophet. It was interesting to me because I thought, he says a little story at the beginning, and he says, my eyes were hurting for a long time, so I went to the shrine of Sayyidah Nafisa, which is a major shrine in Cairo. It's really, she's one of the major saints in the city. And he says, I made a prayer, and I said, I made a tawassul, a prayer, and I said, if my eyes are treated, then I will do something in service of the family of the Prophet. And so he says, times passed and I was lazy and this and that. And then I decided, well, I'm going to do it and I'm going to write. He wrote a book on the manaqib, or the virtues of the family of the Prophet. But in it, he made a point. He made a point of saying, there is a debate who belongs to the family of the Prophet. So Muslims have been aware of these kinds of different traditions, but that nevertheless, like he includes figures among the Sahaba in his introduction, and he talks about them, and his vision might be different from what maybe we would focus on in a particularly in particular conception of who the Ahl al-Bayt are. But it also shows you that in a sense, it's not something that was easily, until the 19th century. He's writing in 1800s. It's not something that was just resolved and we're done with it. No, it is so complicated, and it lives through means that are textual and means that are non-textual, through people's experience, and like the story, for instance, that he mentions. So I mentioned that because I think these examples show us what we lose if we constrict it. And I'm not saying we shouldn't. I think we should have different approaches, but we should also bring these different approaches to talk to each other. Because that really, if in academia this is what we're trying to, we're seeking a clearer vision, a more critical understanding, then one of the things we should do is to bring these into conversation, and then our conversation becomes richer, and we don't lose any part of the audience, so to speak. Yeah. Thank you.
See, what would I do without Dr. Hassan Abbas? Um, Thank you, Dr. Payam, for this opportunity. I'd like to acknowledge also the presence of my co-trustees, Sadiq Jaffer, Mu'taki Jaffer, to be present, who have made the funding possible for us to move on with this project. This is a perfect segue to your question. What we have just listened for the last few minutes, the very absorbing conversations, do not usually take, correct me if I'm wrong, if you've been in any other conversation at any other university where you actually have, in any course, that you would have this kind of discourse. And that is the rationale and the reason for the House of Muhammad project. If we do not do this in academia, and I'll come to the point, if we do not do this in academia, and we leave the House of Muhammad and the Ahl al-Bayt alayhimus salam as a box which we call sectarian, then there's a huge loss, not just to the Muslim Ummah, but also to humanity at large. He was sent as Rahmatul lil Alameen. Mufassirin have been talking about Alameen. Let's talk about this Alam. That even to this Alam, where we live in, confining it is a huge loss. When we discuss the Ahl al-Bayt, when we discuss the House of Muhammad, within that lens of perhaps, as you mentioned, Dr. Payam, that is this a Shi issue, is it a Shi studies issue? I know you are provoking a response. It is almost like, reminds me of Rumi's fable of 7 blind men trying to understand an elephant. If we do not do this, we are one of the blind men. Women are not excluded in this. But we're one of that blind person, that all I see is perhaps a trunk or whatever. This is the beauty of the school of Ahl al-Bayt alayhimus salam. Now, of course, as you said, sister, that the Shi'i studies within the academia, of course, the Ahl al-Bayt, the study of the Ahl al-Bayt is central to it. But it's only one part of the picture. In order to deeply appreciate the picture in its totality, you have to have scope, you have to have depth. And if we bring these two together, then truly we have done justice to the teachings and the following of the Prophet and his family. Let me elaborate. It so happens, and I dare say this to this audience and to a wider audience, and I've got into hot water many times, so I'm used to getting into hot water, that sometimes the Shias have taken, we were talking about Hadith Sakalain, sometimes the Shias have taken the Itra with them, and the Sunnis have taken the Quran. And therefore, the two which the Prophet said will never separate, we have tried to separate. They will not separate. But this is the tragedy of our times. To actually do this in these silos. For the study of wilaya, for the study of imama, certainly it has a place within Shi'i studies, but for it to be wider, when we look at ethics, when we look at compassion, and when we look at how world problems are solved, today we're going through major geopolitical struggles as to how these problems are solved. It is the study of House of Muhammad at this level at academia, rather than being confined into mosques or imam bargas or centers, where these needs to be radiating out, that as we study, for example, the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, where the Prophet, peace be upon him, made a treaty with the kuffar of Makkah for 10 years. We also need to study what was mentioned was the mannerism in which the Blessed Prophet dealt with the Christians of Najran. Time for prayer comes. He does not tell them to go. They themselves volunteer to say, let us go out so that we can do our ibadat. On the Sunday was, the Blessed Prophet said, no, you do it right here in the mosque of the Prophet. This was a pluralism that the world needs to understand. And these are the nuances where we have that we study the lives here of the Aima alayhi salam. Even the Shias themselves have no idea, inside academia or outside. The 10 days of Muharram culminate in the day of Ashura, and that's all we know about Imam Hussain alayhi salam. The Ashura trek that we did has got phenomenal research that's been done by the team, where we see the time of Imam Hussain alayhi salam with the Blessed Prophet, with Imam Ali alayhi salam, with his brother, his own time as a young man and moving forward. This is the depth that is required for the study, and hence the project of the House of Muhammad becomes an extremely valuable thing. Let me end as I began with at least this particular segment, as I began with the fable of Rumi. Rumi also said that when you praise the sun, it is not going to increase the radiance of the sun one iota. What you're doing is praising your own eyes, saying, at least I can see, I have that basira to be able to absorb the light. And this is something that humanity needs to understand about the personalities, about the school of Ahl al-Bayt alayhimus salam, where we have to have the basira. And it is truly a humbling thought. Never did I imagine when I came here to this country some 30 years ago that we would be sitting Harvard University discussing the Ahlul Bayt at the level that we have just seen. That alone is a milestone which is being created today as we launch this project called the House of Muhammad. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Hasnain. Thank you, everyone. Maybe one last question I'll ask, building up of this, and before we open up to all audiences. So what if we even step back farther, and we're here housed at the Harvard Divinity School? What can the study of Ahl al-Bayt teach us even more broadly beyond Islamic studies? So if this is not necessarily just for Shia studies, if it is Islamic studies, is this possible that this can be also broader than Islamic studies? What insights and approaches or contributions can it have for students and audiences interested in discussions of faith and traditions and civilization more broadly? Yes, Hassan.
Thank you. A couple of one. Thank you very much again for this very insightful conversation. I want to just mention one thing which links this with the previous issue with this one, and then I'll answer specifically to what you have asked. I just want to alert the audience to this recent controversy in Egypt, when on the Eid al-Fitr in March this year, one of the priests and sheikh of Al-Azhar University gave a sermon, and he did in his prayer tawassul or intercession to Ahl al-Bayt, especially to the name of Ali, Fatima, Hassan and Hussein, and of course the Prophet Muhammad. And it became a big controversy because people said, which tradition you are following? He said, of course I'm following Sunni tradition. And then the Sunni al-Sunnah tradition, this is core. And he had to backtrack, if not backtrack really, there was a lot of pushback. They made him suspect. Luckily, the president of Egypt, al-Sisi, was sitting in front. So they couldn't say, like in Saudi Arabia, you can arrest the top sheikh of Mecca just because the royal family has issues. They said, al-Sisi, the president, is sitting in front. It was sanctioned, or it was not that he was a rebellious. And this is the Sunni and Shia tradition in which this, and the reason was, there are, of course, so many people from different traditions as well. I think this is related to the contemporary situation as well. I remember clearly when the Iraq war, and I was at Harvard at that time in 2003, when the Iraq war had happened, and people had all of a sudden said, oh, there are Shias, they are majority in Iraq. Then they heard, oh, there are Shia majority in Bahrain. They said, oh, really? In Saudi Arabia, there are 15% Shias. The problem is that the way the message has not reached out to a point where you'll find this monotheistic tradition or this global interfaith tradition to really borrow from Ahl al-Bayt and the family of the Prophet. And in a broader sense, I'm not restricting the family of the Ahl al-Bayt to a restrictive core. I'm saying in the broader sense, like we heard from scholars, it has not happened because the Muslim sectarian agenda, or I would call it the sectarian anxieties that this modern Muslim discourse is buried under, has taken the core of the message away. So that anxiety has to be treated somehow or the other. Is it a philosophical answer that they're looking for? Theological answer? I don't think there's a theological deep problem. There's a political problem. And the political problem has to be taken care of. On your response, I mean, whenever I had read about Karbala, for example, and I'll just quote a famous verse from Iqbal, one of the great poet philosophers from South Asia. I'll say in Urdu and then in English. Gharibo sada aur rangeen hai dastane haram, nihayat iski Hussain, ibtada hai Ismail. The tale of the sacred house is simple, poignant, and full of color. It begins with Hussein, it begins with Ismail, and find its culmination in Hussein. The whole understanding of Ahl al-Bayt from one angle is The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, Ali is to me what Aaron was to Moses. He named his grandsons who are in the Muslim tradition across sectarian divisions. You ask any Muslim from any sect and they'll say, who will be the leaders of heaven? Hassan and Hussein. Where the name Hassan and Hussein came? The name of Aaron, Shabbar and Shabbir. Even there's a deep scholarship now opening up, and I hope you when you're looking at Prophet Muhammad, there's something so deeply connected between Aaron, Moses, and Miriam, and Fatima and Ali and Hassan and Hussein, which needs to be explored. Buddhism, pick Buddhism as an ordinary student of history, and you'll find such great commonalities in the messaging of Buddhism and the great saints of Islam. It is just because we have divorced ourselves, we want to immediately blame. He's a Barelvi Sunni, he's a Salafi, he's talking about too much about Quran, he must be Ahl Hadith. So that's why I would emphasize there's such a great possibility and reality. In reality, so much scholarship has taken place about intra-faith, whether Buddhism or Hindus. There's this tradition of Hussaini in Hindus. I have met them myself. They're Hindus through and through. They would always participate in Muslim tradition in Karbala during Muharram, because they find this idea of sanctity, sacrifice goes beyond Islam, goes beyond any sect. Same is the idea of relics in Christianity, the idea of Holy Family in Christianity. What is it if not can't be compared to Ahl al-Bayt? So there's such a broad domain of intra-faith harmony across monotheistic tradition. Buddhism and Hinduism as well. But I would still argue it is the political sectarian anxiety that restricts the capability and the potential in a global sense of the love of the family of Muhammad. So I really appreciate that you have the initiation of this project, because this will allow you to, like the way you have initiated already through scholarship and a lot of work. I hope this will take it to a much farther level, and commend all those who are supporting and funding this project. Thank you.
May I just have just a segue into what Dr. Hassan Abbas has said, although when he speaks, it's basically wuzu has been done. There's no need for tayammum. And I want to go off the reservation a little bit. And Waqar Sahib, you asked a question, so what? I ask a question, what next? The archives that we have of the school of Ahl al-Bayt is a wounded archive. Over the centuries, from the Umayyads onwards, history was manipulated, rewritten, whatever it is. Now we can whine about it, we can talk about what they did, or we can do something else. Today, we have the good fortune, some may not call it that, I do, is the tool that's available that all of us use every day, and that's AI. Now, I would like to use the metaphor of the house of Muhammad. Houses evolved 1400 years ago. In the same way, the house of Muhammad has evolved through various trajectories, through various histories, through various narrations, depending who wrote them, which hadith was recorded, what tafsir was given. Yesterday would have been a mammoth task to try and bring everything together to make sense of what all these things were and what can we distill from it. Today, through AI, it has become very possible for us to look at the trajectory of that house and bring it to the fore to say, this was the origin, this was the house as it was built, and this is the house that we see today. And I believe that the House of Muhammad project has an opportunity to be able to really bring together centuries of wounded archives, I call it, where we may be able to give out a narrative which is contemporary, a narrative, Akarbai, that your son and your daughter can understand and relate to, a narrative that the wider world is able to look at and say, yes, this makes sense, that this is neither sectarian, this is neither on one side, this is neither devotional, nor is it totally adversarial, but it is something that is logical, that has come through using human wisdom, to use artificial intelligence to bring about the true hikmah so that we understand the house of Muhammad as it should have been and as it was meant to by the Blessed Prophet and as he was directed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's going off the reservation, putting more work, more load on you. But I do believe that there is a possibility of us being able to use these tools to further this particular project. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Hasnain.
Yeah. I think also, since we are at the Divinity School, and your question about what other students of religious studies can learn, religion is studied in the humanities, right? And so a lot of these texts that for instance, since we're talking about the house of the prophet, a lot of religious texts, you can look at it doctrinally, and you can look at it as a place where you get your particular religious teaching. But also, these are timeless. These are works of the humanities, right? Just as you would read Plato or the Psalms. The Psalms are a universal prayer. You don't necessarily. I don't think you necessarily have to be Jewish or Christian to read the Psalms. And learn something from them. And I think a similar thing should happen and needs to happen as we look, and actually has happened historically, but we just don't necessarily know. Like, for instance, the words, the mi'at kalima, or the sad kalima of Imam Ali, the 100 proverbs, were used in the 16th century, as early as the 16th century, to teach Arabic in Europe. Do we know that? Maybe there is scholarship there. So I'm saying these texts and this heritage, any religious heritage, from the perspective of the humanities, carries a lot of weight and carries a lot of value. And so when we look at works like the Nahj al-Balagha or the Sahifa Sajadiyya, which is the topic of my dissertation, there is definitely a way of incorporating those into the classroom, whether it's for linguistic reasons, ethical teaching, historical. So I think it's through works like this and through efforts that actually say, why is this book not on the table? It's actually this is, for instance, I think Professor Tahira Qutbuddin, who recently translated the Nahj al-Balagha, also has a forthcoming article saying, is the Nahj al-Balagha a Shi'i text? And some of these points come through, and I think these kinds of questions, is Karbala a Shi'i event? I think we can get very interesting answers when we look rigorously and academically at some of these questions, and kind of treat them outside of perspective of just doctrine, because religious heritage and religious teaching is so much more than just doctrine.
Just make one quick. Yeah. Thank you, Sarah, for those, and to the board for all the excellent points. Just one thing that also comes to mind when thinking about and the framing of the House of Muhammad, what makes it very interesting, I think, is that it really also can come. The answering this question can help us understand approach the question of the construction of religion itself. So, how do we study religion? Is religion the Quran and the Hadith, right? Or is it embodied? Is it lived? How do we interact with the imams and the houses? The house of Muhammad is alive, right? Muslims believe this. That's why every Arba'in, there's 15 to 30 million Muslims that gather in the largest human gathering in the world, an annual gathering in the world, and go towards the Haram. One of the things I forgot to mention also is that one of the meanings of the word Bayt is also a shrine, if I'm not mistaken, correct? Professor Godarzi has researched as well. it can also mean shrine, not just house. So then it's a shrine. So it's the Kaaba or even the haram of Imam Hussein in Karbala and so on. So the house of Muhammad, it's the imams are alive. Muslims believe that the martyrs don't die, the shuhada don't die, right? So they're alive. They see you, like you interact with them, and they organize your life and give you value and meaning. So the house of Muhammad also, so then it also comes to this question of, we tend to study religion through kind of maybe some Eurocentric legacies, or even maybe like Protestant legacies, which tend to emphasize scriptural, right? So because questions of the Bible are really important, and in terms of like Catholic Protestant divisions in Europe, a lot of this emphasis was on translation of the text itself. So looking at the text as an object. But then we have saying from Imam Ali, "Ana al-Quran al-Natiq." I'm the speaking Quran. He said, right, these people that in the middle of the Battle of Siffin, the other side had raised up the Qur'ans, the Mus'haf of the Qur'ans up. So that's just paper, right? They're using the paper, right? I am the walking Qur'an. I'm the speaking Qur'an. I'm like, it's through the Imam that you can understand the Qur'an. It's through the Prophet, it's through the house of Muhammad that you can understand the Qur'an. So for Shia Islam and for Islam overall, it has to be through the person. It has to be through the Prophet Muhammad. It has to be through the Imams that you interact and see and have face-to-face interactions with them or their representatives, or right, and then it's through that you can understand the religion. So it's a very lived, personal religion. So I think one of the interesting things that can hopefully come out of this project and some of the research that we're doing is to really try to look at the definitions of religion from within indigenous sources of Islam, how Muhammad is understood, how the house of Muhammad is understood by Muslims over time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we can't take any more questions, but again, we're very excited and honored to be able to have this House of Muhammad Ahl al-Bayt initiative here at Harvard University. And again, my deep words of appreciation to the Jaffer Family Foundation of New York, whose generous contribution has allowed this to happen. We actually have our board members here, and I'd like to invite Mr. Sadiq Jaffer to speak with us maybe for a moment here on the Jaffer Family Foundation and on our work that we hope to do here.
Thank you. Distinguished scholars, respected guests, and dear friends, as we conclude this deeply enriching gathering at Harvard Divinity School, we find ourselves reflecting on the significance of what has been initiated here today. The launch of Ahl al-Bayt research initiative is not simply an academic milestone, it is opening of much needed intellectual and scholarly space. A space that invites deeper engagement with legacy of House of Prophet Muhammad, not as a narrow sectarian subject, but as a profound and universal dimensions of human understanding. On behalf of Jaffer Family Foundation, it is both an honor and a responsibility to support initiatives such as this. Over the past 4 years, through our sponsorship of the Ashura program at Harvard and the Imam Ali track, we have demonstrated our enduring commitment to advancing meaningful scholarship, fostering dialogue, and deepening understanding of the Ahl al-Bayt and their timeless legacy. What we have witnessed today is a reminder that study of Ahl al-Bayt is not only about history or theology, it is about values, justice, compassion, knowledge, and moral courage. These are not confined to any one tradition. They resonate across civilization and speak to the shared aspiration of humanity. Our hope is that this initiative will continue to grow as a platform for rigorous scholarship, thoughtful dialogue, and meaningful collaboration, one that inspires not only academic inquiry, but also a deeper appreciation of our shared human heritage. As we live here today, may we carry forward not just what we have learned, but a renewed sense of purpose, to seek knowledge with humility, to engage with openness, and to build bridges where others see divisions. Thank you all for being part of this important beginning. We would especially like to recognize the presence of our chairman, Muhammad Taqi Jaffer. His vision and mission in the philanthropic world are truly unmatched, and it's through his leadership that initiatives like this continue to find purpose and direction. At this juncture, with the permission of the moderator, I'd like to invite Muhammad Taqi Jaffer to share a few words on what inspired him and offer a vote of thanks to all that made this vision into reality. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum to all. Distinguished guests, respected scholars, and dear friends. All protocols observed. It is truly a privilege to be with you today as we mark this important milestone. What we have witnessed here is not just the launch of an academic initiative, but the realization of a vision that has been close to my heart for many years. A vision to create a space where the legacy, scholarship, and intellectual tradition of the Ahl al-Bayt can be studied, discussed, and appreciated at the highest academic level. The journey has been driven by a deep sense of purpose and responsibility to ensure that this rich heritage is not only preserved, but meaningfully advanced for future generations. To see this dream take shape today into a living reality is both humbling and deeply fulfilling. I'd like to extend our sincere appreciation to our distinguished panelists, Brother Hassan Abbas, Sara Aziz, Mohsin Gudarzi, Mohammed Saga, and Hasnan Walji, and to our moderator, Payam Mohseni, for guiding such a thoughtful and enriching discussion. Your contributions have fully set the foundation of what lies ahead. I'm honored to share that this will be the first undertaking of Shia studies in the academic world, and we are grateful to Professor Payam and Mohsin Saga for playing a significant role to get us where we are today. My gratitude also goes to all our partners, supporters, and friends who believe in this vision and help bring to life. This is only the beginning. With continued collaboration and shared commitment, I'm confident that we have started here will grow to something truly impactful. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Muhammad Taqi and Mr. Sadiq. Again, without your generous support, all of our work here at the Harvard Divinity School's project on Shi'ism and Global Affairs would not have been possible. I know we have many questions from the audience here, and I see many questions written here on Zoom chat. My apologies that we will not be able to get them here in this event, but I do appreciate if you have any comments, suggestions, feedback, questions, do let us know, be in contact with us, email, because we will be developing various dimensions of this research as time goes by. So any type of support or inquiry and recommendations and thoughts you may have will actually be very useful for us as we do so. Again, thank you again to all of our panelists today. It was very engaging and insightful conversations. Thank you for all of you for joining us, and I hope that you can join us for future events as well. I did see a question on Zoom about our Ashura workshop. So our Ashura workshop is offered twice a year during the summers and winters. If you are on our email list, you should be getting an email invitation to join the Ashura workshop, which is a series of around 20 plus lectures by academics on the various aspects of the martyrdom of Imam Hussein, the historiography, its cultural understanding, philosophical and theological implications, and how traditions across the world understand it. Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you.
Sponsored by Project on Shi'ism and Global Affairs at Harvard Divinity School and the Jaffer Family Foundation of New York.
Copyright 2026, the President and Fellows of Harvard College.